Alina had lived in the old house on Belgrave Street for nearly 4 months before she noticed the door. It wasn't a particularly large house, certainly not the kind where secret rooms would go unnoticed for long. It creaked with every step, groaned in the winter wind, and salt tendered away of forgotten years. A 2-story brick with peeling green shutters, the house had sat empty for a decade before she moved in. It was cheap, and that was enough. But the door was not there yesterday. It appeared on the second floor at the end of the hallway, where there had only ever been a blank wall. Alina was sure of it. She stood before it now, blinking at the faded blue paint, at the brass handle dulled with age. Her fingers twitched at her side, uncertain. She turned around, went back downstairs, made tea, and didn't look at the door again until nightfall. That night she dreamed of the sea. It came to her not in crashing waves, but in silence. Vast and dark, encased in space, the sea in her dream was empty, no stars, no moon, just endless water. Something moved beneath it, slow and massive, but she could never see it. Only feel the pressure. Like the water itself was watching her. When she woke, her sheets were damp with sweat, and the house felt colder. The door was still there. At work, she tried to bring it up casually with her colleague, Marcus. "You ever notice weird stuff in old houses?" she asked, stirring too much sugar into her coffee. He glanced at her. "Define weird, like doors that shouldn't be there, rooms that don't show up on the plans." Marcus laughed. "You've been reading Reddit again, maybe." He leaned in, grinning. "Honestly, yeah, my uncle had this house in Vermont, hall stairwell behind a bookshelf, found it after he died, led to this room filled with dolls, creepiest thing I've ever seen, the god," she muttered. "What did they do with them?" "They burned the whole room." When she got home, the door was open. Not wide, just a crack, as if someone had changed their mind halfway through. The hallway smelled faintly of salt and mildew, and for one sick moment, Alina thought she heard the low rush of waves. She shut the door. She didn't open it again for a week. That week, things got strange. Small, unsettling things. Her shoes moved during the night, ending up in different rooms. Keys disappeared for hours only to turn up inside the fridge. The tap in the upstairs bathroom turned on by itself twice. The dreams continued. Always the sea. Always the pressure. Something beneath the water, vast and lonely and waiting. She started sleeping with the lights on. On the 7th day, the door opened again. This time, wide enough to see inside. There was no room. No furniture. Just a narrow staircase descending into darkness. And at the bottom, water. Black, glistening, and possibly still. Alina closed the door, locked it, and pushed a bookcase in front of it. It did not help. That night, she heard footsteps coming from inside the wall. The sound of footsteps continued for hours. Soft at first, like someone walking barefoot on old wood. Then louder pacing, deliberate. Alina lay on her bed, unmoving, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, though she could see nothing in the dark. The sound didn't come from the hallway or the stairs. It came from inside the wall, inside the space behind the door. Except there was no space behind that wall. There couldn't be. At 3:14 a.m., everything went silent. And then came the voice. It wasn't a voice in the usual sense, not words, not even sound. It arrived as pressure behind her eyes, like something speaking from inside her skull. "You are hollow too." Alina sat upright so fast the bed frame groaned. Her heart thudded violently in her chest. The room was empty. The hallway was silent. And when she crept to the door, heart pounding, the bookcase was still there. Still. But the door behind it was gone. There was only blank wall. Alina didn't go to work the next day. She told Marcus she was sick. In a way, it was true. She spent the day wandering her own house, fingers brushing the edges of walls, of windowsills and vents, trying to find any sign of the impossible door. Nothing. She checked the hallway a dozen times, no door, no seam in the pane, not even a dent in the floor where the bookcase had stood. She began to think she'd hallucinated the whole thing. That is, until she found the water. It was just a thin trail, almost invisible, leading from the corner of her bedroom to the closet door. A snail-esque path of salt and shadow. She opened the closet and found her coat soaked through. It reeked of brine. That night she did not sleep. At 4:07 a.m. the bookcase slid 6 inches across the floor. She didn't move it. It moved on its own. She watched it from the bed, paralyzed. There was no wind. No draft. No logical explanation. Just a screech of wood against wood. By the time the sun came up, Alina had packed a bag. She told herself she would leave. Just for a night to rent a room somewhere. Get her mind right. But she never made it out the door. As she reached for her keys, her hand brushed the old photo of her mother on the hallway shelf. She froze. There was something written on the glass just faintly, as if drawn with condensation. "It remembers you." Alina dropped the frame. It shattered. She went back upstairs. There was no logic to it. No reason. Only a tug in her chest, low and steady, like a weight being pulled by a silent tide. She stopped in front of the blank wall. And the door was there again. No sound. No shimmer of magic or flash of light. It simply was. As if it had always been. As if it belonged more than she did. This time she did not try to close it. The staircase inside was exactly as before, dark wood steps descending into a lightless space. There was no smell now, no salt, no mildew. Only silence. And something deeper than silence. She took one step down, then another. 10 steps in, she felt the temperature change. It wasn't tea colder, it was nothing. A void. The kind of air that didn't touch your skin, didn't fill your lungs. She should have gone back. Should have turned and run. But the pressure behind her eyes was back, that strange static hum. You are not what you think you are. The staircase ended abruptly in a corridor of smooth black stone, wet and glistening. The air was too still. There were no doors, no branches, just a straight line forward. Somewhere far ahead, she thought she heard breathing. Or was it the sea? She began to walk. 10 minutes passed. Or an hour. Or a second. Time was different here. Everything was different. The walls pulsed faintly with each step she took, like the inside of a creature too large to imagine. Finally, she saw it, a mirror. It stood at the end of the hallway, tall and ornate, framed in a tarnished silver that looked like driftwood. She stopped 2 feet in front of it and stared. What she saw was not her reflection. The figure in the glass had her eyes, her shape, but the face was wrong. Gaunt. Hollow-cheeked. Eyes black as night. The thing smiled. And spoke. But not with its mouth. "You opened the way. We've been waiting." Alina stumbled back from the mirror. Her own face not, her face still grinned at her through the glass, unmoving. The thing that wore her features cocked its head slightly as though amused by her panic. Its eyes were a void, the color of deep space, and something writhed within them. Something with no name. She reached out a trembling hand toward the frame, not to touch the glass, but to see if it was real. Solid. Her fingers made contact with the silver edge. The mirror hissed. The glass rippled outward in concentric circles, like water disturbed by a pebble. Alina gasped and yanked her hand back. The thing inside didn't flinch. "You don't remember, do you?" The voice whispered, not out loud, but inside her. "How many times have you come here? How many times have you left?" She shook her head. "This is the first dead lie." The word struck like a blow. She backed away, heart pounding, arms wrapped around herself. The corridor behind her now looked longer, infinitely long, as though the moment she had turned her back on it, it had grown teeth. "What are you?" she asked aloud, her voice dry and small. The thing in the mirror leaned closer, mouth twitching in what could have been amusement or hunger. "I am your shape in the deep." Alina turned and ran. The corridor didn't end. Her footsteps echoed, distorted, swallowed by something vast and formless. The air grew heavier. Her lungs ached. It felt like running underwater. Then she heard it again, the sea. Only now it wasn't distant. Now it was rising. She turned a corner that hadn't been there before sharp, and sudden and found herself standing before another door. This one was wooden, warped with moisture, no handle in sight. As the sound of water surged behind her, she slammed her palms against the door. Nothing. The corridor behind her had filled to her knees, with water in seconds. It was cold, then deep. Her breath caught in her throat as the mirror voice returned. "If you re-hollow, you float. If you remember, you sink." The water reached her waist. She screamed, pounding the door again, sobbing. Something brushed her ankle, slippery and long. The door pulsed beneath her hands. And then it opened. She fell forward into light. Not warm sunlight, not safety, just brightness. Bleached, sterile, humming. Alina was on a tiled floor, drenched, gasping, her hands scraped raw. She was back in her house. No, not quite. It was the hallway. Same wooden floors. Same green runner. But everything was off. Too clean. Too quiet. The clock on the wall was ticking backward. A low-frequency buzz filled the air like a sound just below hearing. And down the hall, standing at the base of the stairs, was her mother. Or someone who looked like her. The woman's back was turned. She stood perfectly still, hands at her sides, wearing the same maroon sweater Alina remembered from the funeral. Slowly, the figure turned. The face was almost right, but the eyes were wrong. So dark. So empty. "I never left," the figure whispered. Alina turned and ran again, up the stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering. She reached her bedroom and slammed the door. Locked it. Pushed her dresser in front of it for good measure. She stood in the center of the room, soaked to the bone, every inch of her trembling. Her hands were blue. Her lips numb. Then her phone rang. It was on the bedside table, screen lighting up, unknown caller. Against her better judgment, she answered. There was silence. "Then are you re-waking up too slow?" Thick. Hours passed. Were minutes. She couldn't tell anymore. She didn't dare sleep. Instead, she sat in the corner of the room, eyes on the door, shivering in wet clothes. At 3:33 a.m., the mirror above her dresser cracked down the middle. A hairline fracture thin and straight, like a wound. When she looked into it, she no longer saw herself. She saw the staircase, the one behind the door, and the sea at the bottom was rising. By morning, the crack in the mirror had vanished. No sign of fracture, no evidence of water on the floor, no broken glass from the night before. The dresser hadn't moved, yet the door behind it was now slightly ajar, as though someone had opened it from the other side and forgotten to close it all the way. Lena didn't move for a long time. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She called her sister. "Ellie, you okay?" Sarah's voice sounded drowsy but alert, as if somewhere deep down she'd expected this call for a long time. "I think I am losing my mind," Alina whispered. There was a pause. "Tell me what is happening." Lena did. Not everything. She left out the voice in her head, the mirror version of herself, but enough. The door, the staircase, the sea. The dreams. Sarah didn't laugh. Didn't question. "Lena," she said gently. "Before Mom died." Alina froze. "What are you talking about? I mean, really remember, like, anything before age 10, can you?" Yeah, she tried. Tried to summon a birthday. A Christmas. A laugh. A smell. All she found was a thick fog, like trying to look through frosted glass. "No," she said finally. "I think it is time you came home," Sarah said. Alina took the train north that same day, her soaked coat replaced, her suitcase filled more with fear than clothes. The house watched her as she left. She could feel it. Something heavy pressed against the windows from the inside, like it wanted to see her face one last time. She didn't look back. Sarah met her at the station. Same eyes. Same tired smile. Lena hadn't realized how much she'd missed that face. They hugged for a long time. And then Sarah said something strange. "You brought it with you, didn't you?" Lena pulled back. "What?" "I felt it the moment the train pulled in. It followed you." They drove to Sarah's place in silence. A small cottage by the wood, far from the ocean, far from old houses with impossible doors. It felt safe. Warm. But Alina couldn't shake the feeling that something was already inside. That night, she dreamed not of the sea but of the mirror. It stood in the middle of the forest, taller than the trees, the reflection showing not her face but her house on Belgrave Street on fire. And someone was inside. Screaming. She woke at dawn gasping. Sarah was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with an old photo album. "You need to see this," she said. Alina sat beside her. The first few pages were familiar baby pictures, birthdays, her father laughing before he left. But then there was a photo she didn't remember. A room she didn't recognize. A staircase, the staircase. And a woman standing at the top holding a little girl's hand. Not their mother. Someone else. "Alina," Sarah said softly, "you used to talk about the door in the house. Every night. You said it led to the deep place. That there were things in it that knew your name." Alina stared at the photo. "I thought you made it up, the trauma thing, but now I think maybe it was real. Maybe it has always been with you." That evening, Sarah gave her something else. A journal. Old leather bound, the edges frayed with time. Alina opened it, heart pounding. It wasn't hers, but the handwriting was familiar. Too familiar. It was hers. From when she was 9. The first page read, "If you find this again, it means they failed." Page after page described the same thing, the door, the stairs, the sea, the voice in the mirror. The last entry was short. "They say if I forget, it starts over. I think I have to go back." Alina closed the journal with shaking hands. She understood now. She hadn't found the door. She'd returned to it. That night, Alina didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the guest bed in Sarah's cottage, the journal in her lap, the memory of that photo etched behind her eyes. The woman who wasn't there. Mother. The hand gripping hers like it belonged there. The stairs behind them, endless and black. She'd drawn that staircase 100 times as a child on napkins, the backs of homework, her bedroom walls. She thought it had been a dream, a child's overactive imagination. Now she knew better. The deep place was real, and it had never let her go. At 2:11 a.m., the mirror cracked again. But this time, it wasn't in her bedroom. It was in Sarah's hallway. Alina heard it as a sharp, splitting sound, followed by a low thrum of air, as if something ancient had inhaled. She crept out of bed, journal in hand, and followed the sound. The hallway mirror ornate, oval, something Sarah had inherited from their grandmother, was fractured top to bottom. The crack was glowing. Faint blue light pulsed from within the glass-like veins beneath skin. As she stepped closer, she saw the sea again. But this time, she was standing on it. In the reflection, Lena stood barefoot on the surface of the black water. Waves are moving, sky starless. The version of her in the mirror lifted one hand and pointed. Whispered something. Lena leaned in. It was her own voice. There a door in Sarah's basement. By dawn, she had found it. Behind old boxes, beneath a threadbare top, was a low wooden door tucked into the wall of the basement, so small she would have to crawl to enter. She stared at it for a long time, her fingers trembling as they touched the rusted iron latch. It wasn't locked. When she pulled it open, cold air spilled out, thick with brine. And just beyond the threshold, a stairs, descending endlessly into dark water. She slammed it shut. Sarah didn't even look surprised. Alina, you can keep running from it. Whatever this is, it chose you a long time ago. I don't want it, Alina said, voice cracking. I want a normal life. I want to be left alone. I think, Sarah said gently, that was never an option. They sat together for a long time in silence, the journal between them. Don't you remember? Alina asked finally. If it was real, why just me? I don't know, Sarah said. Maybe it only needed one of us. That evening, Sarah drew something in the dirt outside the cottage. A sigil. Simple and old. She said she'd seen it once in the back of the grandmother's spellbook long before she stopped believing in anything. I am not saying it'll stop whatever is happening, Sarah said. But maybe it'll slow it down. That night, Alina dreamed not of the deep place, but of the woman from the photo. Only now, the woman had no face. Just a shape made of water, her features shimmering in and out of existence. She reached for Alina. Spoke with the voice of the sea. We gave you to her. She gave you to us. Alina woke to find the journal open on her chest. A new page had been written while she slept. You've been here 10 times before. You never make it past a mirror. She stared at the page, her breath caught in her throat. Then, below the writing, something else appeared. A symbol. A circle inside a triangle, both crossed with a vertical line. She had no memory of ever drawing it. But her hand knew the shape. It ached to complete it. At 3:00 a.m., the basement door opened on its own. No wind. No sound. Just a slow creak. And the faint sound of dripping. As if the deep place was leaking into the world again. Alina stood at the threshold of the basement door, the cold air coiling around her ankles like fog. Behind her, the house was silent, Sarah still asleep, or perhaps pretending. The journal in Alina's hand felt heavier than paper and ink. It felt like an anchor. She held a flashlight in her other hand, but something told her it wouldn't work for long. The stairs beyond the door looked the same as before. The same as in the house on Belgrave Street. The same as in the mirror. The impossible blackwood. The silent air. The sense of pressure growing with each breath she took. She took the first step. Then another. And another. With every footfall, she felt her body becoming lighter. No, not lighter. Less. Her skin still held her together, but something inside was drifting. Shifting. Hollow in. The staircase went on. There was no light but the faint blue glow rising from below, as though the water at the bottom had learned to shimmer. Her flashlight dimmed. Flickered. Then died completely. She didn't stop walking. Eventually, the stairs ended. She stood on a stone platform suspended over a black pool so vast that the edges disappeared into darkness. The surface was perfectly still. No ripples. No movement. And yet something moved beneath it. The pressure in her skull returned. You are not what they made you forget. The voice wasn't hers this time. It wasn't even human. It came from the water, from the air, from within. A shape rose from the water. She couldn't scream. Couldn't move. It was tall, glistening wrong. A figure made of liquid and shadow with no face, just the idea of one. A memory of form. It didn't walk. It arrived, and it held something in its hands. A mirror. Not a glass one, this was liquid silver, frame and bone. When Elena looked inside, she saw every version of herself that had ever existed. Crying at 5. Screaming at 10. Silent at 15. Staring into the sea at 27. Each one reaching toward her. You left pieces of yourself behind, the voice said. Come and take them back. She stepped forward. The water touched her toes. It was warm. Not comforting, but familiar. She walked in, slowly, until it reached her knees. Her waist. Her chest. The mirror hovered before her, unmoving, waiting. Her reflections inside were clearer now. Not frozen. Alive. Watching her. And then they began to speak all at once. We were not trapped, you are. The house is a shell, you weave the yoke. We never left the deep place. Lena reached out. Her fingers touched the mirror, and she fell into herself. She woke on the stairs. Gasping. Soaked. Alone. The basement was empty. No mirror. No water. No door. Only darkness. And something in her hand. She looked down. It was a small, wet stone carved with the same symbol from the journal. The triangle. The circle. The line. But now it glowed faintly, pulsing with each beat of her heart. She crawled back up the stairs, each movement hotter than the last. The pressure in her skull faded slowly, replaced by a different feeling weight. She was heavier now. Well, whole? She didn't know. But the air felt different. The house no longer watched her. Sarah was in the kitchen when she emerged. She looked at Elena's face, her soaked clothes, the stone in her hand, and said nothing. Only nodded. You brought something back this time, she said softly. I think it brought me back, Elena replied. That night, Sarah locked the basement door and placed salt along the frame. But it was already too late. Because now the sea wasn't in the deep place anymore. It was in her. And it was still rising. The stone wouldn't stop glowing. Elena wrapped it in towels, locked it in a drawer, buried it in a tin box behind Sarah's shed, and still it pulsed faintly through the wood and metal and soil. Like a heartbeat that wasn't hers, echoing in her bones. She stopped sleeping. Not because she couldn't but because when she did, she went back. Back into the deep place. Back into the water. Each time she awoke soaked, lungs aching, clothes damp with sea brine. The salt lines Sarah had poured around the basement door had dried and cracked as if something had tasted them. By the 4th night, Sarah said what neither of them wanted to hear. It is not a haunting anymore, she whispered. It has become you. They left the cottage. Packed only what they needed, Sarah's notebooks, the journal, the strange stone Elena couldn't throw away. They drove inland. No destination. Just distance. But the sea followed. Elena saw it in reflection storefront windows, puddles, the chrome curve of car bumpers. Always still. Always watching. In one gas station. Bathroom mirror, her reflection didn't blink when she did. It just smiled. Where are we even going? She asked as they crossed the border into Vermont. Sarah answered without looking at her. Grandmother's cabin, there is something buried there, something she told me to keep hidden until you remembered. Elena said nothing, because inside her pocket the stone warned. The cabin was exactly as she remembered, crooked porch, moss-covered shingles, wind chimes that never made a sound. Sarah led her inside through the kitchen, into the cellar beneath the floorboards. The air was thick. Old magic lived in the walls here. Elena could feel it pressing against her skin like humidity. There, beneath a sheet of rotting canvas, was a chest. And inside, a mask. Bone-white smooth, carved from driftwood. Hollow eyes. No mouth. Elena touched it and fell to her knees. Images exploded behind her eyes, memories, not hers, or maybe all hers, a woman with no face whispering beside the sea. A child, carried down black stairs. Salt water flooding a crib. A voice chanting in a language no living person spoke. When she came back to herself, Sarah was holding her. You wore that mask, Sarah said quietly. You used to say it kept the deep place from seeing you. Did it work? Elena asked. I don't know, Sarah said. But you always took it off right before it pulled you back. They burned sage. Drew protective circles. Lit candles made from black wax and old herbs. The house creaked but did not protest. That night, Elena wore the mask. She fell asleep by the fire, the stone beneath her pillow, the journal open to the last written page. In her dream, she was underwater again. But this time, she wasn't sinking. She was walking. Through ruins. Columns and doorways, broken statues with faces like curs, all submerged in silent blue. The deep place wasn't just a void. It was a city. And it was waking up. She passed a doorway made of coral and stone, and inscribed along its frame with it was not in ink but in light. When the hollow remembers, the sea will rise. Lena woke choking. Not on smoke or fever, but on salt water. Her lungs burned. Her hair was soaked. The fire had gone out. Sarah knelt over her, terrified. Elena, you are gone. You stopped breathing. I saw it, she gasped. The city, it is not just watching, it is waiting. For what? Elena didn't answer. Because she already knew. The deep place was waiting for her to come back. And say, 3 days passed. They stayed in the cabin, but the world outside began to change. The sky grew darker early, even at midday. Radios picked up strange static. Birds stopped singing. The reflection in Elena St. didn't match the room she was in. Sarah barely spoke anymore. She studied the journal obsessively, muttering fragments of phrases: protection rights, banishment invocations, old languages they had never learned but now understood. The words felt oily in their mouths, like they came from deeper than memory. Deep place wasn't just a nightmare or dimension. It was a place that used to be part of the world. And Lena was its door. On the 4th night, the stone cracked. A thin line split down its center with a sound like glass under pressure. From the break, a single drop of seawater welled up and hovered in the air, weightless, gleaming, whispering. It didn't fall. Lena touched it. The cabin vanished. She was back in the city beneath the water. This time she was not walking, she was expected. Doors opened before her without touch. Creatures watched her from balconies shaped like shells and bone, their eyes wide and mournful. They bowed as she passed. She passed murals etched in stone, painted not with pigment, but with memory. They showed a girl born in 2 worlds. 1 foot in silence, 1 in skin. A child chosen, hollowed out, filled with something older than breath. They showed her. At the heart of the city stood a throne. Not golden. Not grand. Just a ring of soulstone and shatter. And seated upon it, waiting, was herself. Older. Wilder. Empty-eyed. This version of Elena had gills on her neck. Seaweed in her hair. Her hands were longer, bonus translucent. When she spoke, her voice cracked reality. You made it farther this time. Elena couldn't speak. We were left behind, all of us, you and I. We were bridges between the surface and the below. The moment they sealed the door, you forgot, and every time you remembered, we pulled you back. You always turned away. Elena trembled. I am not one of you. You are not one of them either. That's the point. Her reflection stepped forward. Her skin shimmered like oil in moonlight. This world was ours once. Now it is hollow, and only the hollow can open it again. Elena turned and ran. The throne room screamed behind her, stone shattering, water rising. The creatures in the city wailed not in fear, but mourning, as if they had hoped and now knew better. She fell upward, woke in the cabin. Sarah was gone. The fire was cold. Her bag, her coat, her notes all still there. But the front door stood open, and beyond it, a trail of wet footprints leading into the trees. Not away from the cabin, toward the lake. Elena followed. The forest was quiet, not dead listening. At the lake's edge, Sarah stood ankle deep in the water, her back turned. Elena stopped. Sarah. Her sister turned and smiled, but the smile wasn't hers. Thank you, the thing said in Sarah's voice. We only needed one of you. Then it sank. Without splash. Without ripple. Gone. Elena collapsed to her knees, the weight in her chest too heavy to bear. The stone in her pocket was glowing now brighter than ever. She pulled it out. The crack had spread. Water poured from it like blood. The sky rumbled. The wind tasted of salt. The sea was coming back. Not just to her. To everything. The rain began at midnight. But it wasn't rain. It was brown thick, heavy drops that smelled like old blood and rusted iron. The lake overflowed within an hour. By morning, half the forest was underwater. Roads dissolved. Phones went dead. The world grew quieter with every passing second, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Elena watched it happen from the cabin's porch, the stone pulsing in her palm like a second heart. It had stopped leaking, but its glow now cast shadows, even in full daylight, shadows that moved. She didn't know what was left of Sarah, if anything. But she felt her. In the lake. In the trees. Inside, the pressure building beneath her feet. The deep place was no longer a dream or a hidden stairwell. It was here. And it wanted her to come home. She opened the journal for the last time. There was only one unwritten page left. It was blank. But when she touched it, words bled across the parchment in her handwriting. The door was never in the house was in the door. She read the sentence over and over until it made sense. Then she took the stone, the journal, and the mask and walked into the flood. The water rose to meet her. Not violently. Not cruelly. Lovingly. Like a mother reclaiming what had always been hers. Alina didn't struggle. She let the weight carry her down, let her feet leave the forest floor, let the pressure close around her like a womb. When she opened her eyes underwater, she saw stars. Not reflections. Stars bright and wheeling, as if the sky had reversed. The city of the hollow had broken through, and she was standing at its gate. It had changed. Where once the deep place had been ruins and silence, now it was alive. Lights glowed from bone lanterns. Doors opened and closed. Music echoed notes that didn't follow earthly rolls. A language made of tides and heartbeat. The throne still waited at the center, but no one sat in it. This time she didn't run. As she approached the throne, the other versions of herself emerged from the corridors. Not hostile. Not even sad. Just waiting. Watching. Each one bore the marks of the deep place guild, changed, fluid. One had no eyes. One was all teeth. One flickered in and out of shape like memory in motion. Alina stood before them. I don't want to forget again, she said. The chorus of cells whispered, then don't. She placed the stone in the center of the throne. It sank into the salt rock like it belonged there. And the deep place exhaled. Above the waterline, the flood began to recede. Town still drowned, but the sea stopped rising. For now. Somewhere in the hills, people whispered about the storm that came and vanished, the vanished lake, the pressure in the air. No one remembered the woman in the house on Belgrave Street. But the door was still there. Sometimes. When the moon was wrong. In the city below, Lena sat on the saltstone throne. Changed. Not monstrous. Not hollow. But whole. Her eyes were the color of the ocean before a storm. She did not rule. She remembered. And that was enough. Years passed. Above the surface, the world moved on. Houses were rebuilt. Floods were written off as freak. Weather events. Scientists debated climate shifts and magnetic anomalies. No one talked about mirrors that grinned, or water that sang, or girls who vanished. But in quiet places, between sleep and waking, in a hum between radio stations, people sometimes heard a voice. The patient. Calling a name they didn't know they remembered. Alina. Below, the deep place thrived. The city was growing again, breathing, remembering itself. Statues stood where empty chambers had once been. New passages opened like wounds healing in reverse. Creatures returned from long exile in darker waters. They bowed to her not in worship, but in recognition. She wasn't a queen. She was a beacon. The first hollow to come home and stay. She sat on the throne not as a prisoner, but as a keeper. Of memory. Of tide. Of endings that had not yet come. She wrote again. Not in journals, but in salt. Her thoughts etched themselves into the walls of the city, glowing faintly as they dried. She left warnings for those who would come after. Do not follow reflections. The sea speaks in shapes. Hollow is not empty. It is unfinished. She didn't expect anyone to read them. But she left them anyway. Because forgetting is how it starts. And remembering is how it ends. Sometimes, other versions of herself still walked the city. But they no longer looked lost. They had found peace in fragments. They tended gardens of coral and bone. They sang lullabies to the sleeping tides. They carved new doors for others to find, the doors hidden in dream logic and riverbeds and the backs of broken clocks. The hollow were rebuilding. They weren't monsters. They were reminders. Proof that you can be broken and still be vast. One day, Lena stood at the very edge of the deep place, where the ocean met the stars. The surface shimmered above her, barely a whisper now. She could see the world she'd left behind, trees, rooftops, a sky smeared with smog and regret. She could return if she wanted. There was still a sliver of her that belonged there. But she didn't move. Instead, she whispered, I remember now. The sea rippled in answer. Not to pull her back, but to carry her forward. Up there, someone would find her house one day. The one on Belgrave Street. They would open the wrong door, walk down the wrong stairs, and hear a voice in the dark saying, You've been here before. because the weight of hollow things isn't in their emptiness. It is in what they used to hold, and what they might hold again.